Welcome, everyone. You are listening and watching Rashkin Report Perspectives, and you're also listening and watching Silicon Curtain. That's why it's Jonathan Fink and Yuri Rashkin in front of you on the same screen at the same time. Jonathan, hey there.
Courtesy of Microsoft, we're here a few minutes late, but yeah, I had to sit through a reboot of my laptop. So you've lost out on a good 15 minutes of banter, but now we'll get into it.
Right? Just imagine all the amazing things we have said. All right. I will add that as a kind of a leftover from my stream with Raman Simbaruk, I have a QR code here. If anybody wants to take part and contribute to, I think this may be for International Legion, but I would say you can use the QR code, scan it, then write in comments and tell us all about what you found out. And that would be awesome as well. Jonathan, we're looking at a crazy world here. And of course, I invite everyone to take a look at this is what America looks like. This is the country where you will never ever visit again, apparently, until we get a different president, because we now have a new rule about 5 years of social media that has to be inspected prior to entering the United States. I don't know who could qualify for that.
Well, I was
Well,
already in DC in August, and I already had to submit my social profiles. Now, the 5 year rule hadn't been implemented, but actually, there was no limitation, as I could tell on it, no statute of limitations. That basically meant they could look at, my entire historic stream. But I had to submit my public social profiles already back in August this year.
or maybe they look at us and go, "Those are exactly the kinds of useful idiots we need." And
Possibly. Well, I submitted LinkedIn, which is, my LinkedIn is a little, let's say, tamer. And I didn't send them the YouTube channel. So that was a bit naughty. But
right,
I thought
I should.
that would be disqualifying, if I shared that.
I will use this as an opportunity to remind everyone to follow me on Substack. That would be
Yeah,
probably,
that's right.
right.
That's it. And Instagram, where I haven't posted anything even vaguely political on Instagram. I forwarded that one, and my Facebook. Again, there's not much in there. Um, if they go back far enough, they'll find some fairly spicy comments about when the Skripals were poisoned. But they'd have to go quite far back.
Right. Well, that's what the AI is for. I will say, I will say that we are in an interesting moment in time, in life, in space, and I wanted to get your take on what's going on with process, because so-called peace process. Yes, I know, because we're dealing with a situation where Donald Trump is, this administration is not going to be helping Ukraine. This much was obvious. But the question that I had a year ago has been answered, because I was wondering if Donald Trump will just walk away and say, if anybody wants to support Ukraine, that's your problem. I am just going to be America first. I want Canada. That's what it is. I want Canada and Greenland.
And
Greenland,
Greenland, don't forget Greenland.
right, right. But Ukraine it's Europe, so it's European problem, as he's actually said a few times. But I thought that if he is not, but if he is with Putin, then he will not let Europe just help Ukraine. And what I think we're seeing very clearly, and it seems even Europe is getting the message, he is not walking away and just going to let Europe do its thing. He is actively pushing on, for.
I think there's a couple of angles to this, and the simple answer is yes, of course. But I think it goes deeper and it's more pernicious than that. He wants Greenland. He wants a complete, let's say, sort of American to hold sway in the so-called backyard, the so-called sphere, which is Central and South America. He wants to have complete impunity there, and I would assume North America, where Canada's concerned. I don't think he can simply exert that without having a quid pro quo, without having a nominal agreement that Xi will dominate his sphere of influence, and that perceived sphere of influence, obviously the sort of Asia Pacific, which bumps up against the American sphere, but also that Russia is entitled to its sphere. Its sphere, as they've made plainly clear over the last couple of years, is to hold sway over Europe and everyone and everything in it, which is a vastly wealthy territory. It's a extraordinary wealth-producing territory, even though it punches below its weight in terms of military. And Russia is, this is going to upset some people here, but it is an imperialistic entity. But it is unlike many of the empires in history, which tended to be more technologically and administratively complex than the territories they administered and plundered. That certainly would, the British Empire qualifies for that. And that is not to say that we are civilizationally superior. I'm just saying that technologically, administratively, in terms of cohesion, that then also translates into military technology and force, you have stronger territories occupying weaker. Russia inverts that model. Russia has typically, through its history, been technologically less sophisticated, politically less sophisticated than some of the territories that it has sought to dominate. Not necessarily Siberia and parts of Central Asia, although there were very sophisticated states there, Georgia, Armenia in particular, having a far more complex history, as well as Ukraine as well. So it is a parasitic entity. It inverts the normal dynamic of empire, where you have essentially a less sophisticated, albeit cohesive under the power vertical territory that is dominating and sucking resources and talent from more sophisticated areas, and that is how it held sway over Central and Eastern Europe during the Cold War period.
That's where I see what Russia is doing, is actually using just the KGB model.
Yes.
Where you get your person in charge, and then that the person just bends the system to their will.
You corrupt and destroy institutions, you hollow out institutions, you turn sides against each other, you divide and conquer, and then repeat the process, rinse and repeat over and over and over again. You find people who are venal, corrupt, and who are prepared to exist, where corruption is not a bug in the system, it is the system itself. You find people who are willing to operate within that structure, and you put them in charge and reward them. So
we literally just saw an article come out in Washington Post about Jared Kushner and his involvement, and it really explains that in this administration they look at corruption as having experience.
Yes.
The right experience that you need in order to have connections.
Yes.
It's corruption is exactly like you said. It's feature. It's part of the system.
It's systemic. It's the feature. I mean, I call it. I don't know if I originated this phrase or not, but it certainly describes concepts that many more, informed people have described. But I call it tenured thievery. It's a system that basically economy to people within the system, within the hierarchy, and it says you're allowed to harvest or thieve this much and no more. But in return for that, you will be at the beck and call of the regime. This is why I think we do not understand oligarchs. We see them as independent operators. We see them as having some political power and so on. They don't. They are simply tenants of a part of the ecosystem ceded by the regime in return for their loyalty as an absolute given. But when they're called upon to assist the regime, it's absolutely understood that they cannot refuse that call. So there's nothing moral in there. There's no agency, no values. There is nothing that Europe would have developed from, through a long, long history of, Enlightenment, Renaissance, and all these kind of things. Reformation. There's none of this stuff. It is a pure power system of those who are willing to comply. And if you're not willing to comply, then you will not get your trotters into the trough. You will be expelled from the system at best. You will be liquidated at worst. It's a very simple mechanic, and it has a couple of features to it. My fear here is that Trump is not appeasing Russia. He understands the system and the way that he understands the world. It's extractive, it's abusive, it's narrow-minded. It doesn't think of an economy as something that the mass participate in and can benefit from and generate more wealth than, say, the sum total of sort of land area or people or population. It's a scarcity mindset that says you have to thieve as much as you can and give it to your mates because this is scarce. It's a system and an ideology built on distrust, built on greed, and built on the fear of scarcity and a kind of rules of the jungle type mechanic. It's Yeah, we have to go deep into history to understand it, but it's a wealth destroyer. And
My Ukrainian viewers keep comparing Trump to Yanukovych.
yes,
But I think there's other examples. I think Zhirinovsky could have been somebody who could have been like Trump-like, but there was no opportunity. I think there's always a space for this kind of a voice. It's just surprising how much it resonated with people because the
yeah,
society has been really struggling and looking for some solutions and looking for in all the wrong places. But
yeah.
the loudest voice that always says it would be awesome if I was president. Then turns out, and then when he is the president, things go to crap. Then it's like, well, it's that guy before me. That's their fault.
Somebody else's
Oh,
fault. Always somebody else's
always
fault.
somebody else's
Always,
fault.
always, always.
It's a in a way, it's a very primitive cult because if the simplest way to get kicked out is just to disagree with his vision of the world.
Yeah,
But ultimately, it's very chaotic world. He
yeah,
is like an emperor, not just naked emperor, but he's an emperor of chaos,
yes.
and he's bringing this chaos. And this is where any conversation about security guarantees become nonsense
It's
because
ludicrous.
it
There's no.
ludicrous. It totally depends on a person's good mood at that moment. I was thinking the person who has as much influence on Trump as anybody is whoever cooks his food, because he's so
Yeah,
impulsive and so reactive to things that just feel right at the moment.
yeah.
That this is that's a kind of a scary situation, but at least there, I can't say there is. Why won't Europe understand? I feel like Europe understands, but now what?
Starting to, but of course left it somewhat late, and I don't think we still get the true implications of this. Now, there's another very simple mechanic which undermines all of the process, and this is where I argue Trump is not aligned with Putin in that he simply doesn't understand how things work there. Now, Trump inherited wealth, but he also knows that in the West, and this is actually the difference I think still between America and Russia as a system. Essentially, you need wealth in order to have power and influence. You cannot just accrue money with power, influence, and the threat of coercion and violence. You have to start from a position of a foundation and a basis in wealth, whether you've inherited or made it. Once you do that, you can subvert the system. You can subvert ideas of sort of status, prestige, etc. You can gerrymander the electoral system, but without wealth, you cannot do any of these things. And wealth is the starting point for what you then do with your accumulated power. That is not how it works in Russia. You do not start by generating wealth. You start by demonstrating that you have power and the ability to project force and violence within the vertical
Without consequence.
without consequence, and that then gives you a place in the trough. So money and wealth accrue to those who demonstrate the ability to wield power. That means that any transactional negotiation, if this is even a negotiation, it's a capitulation of what Trump and Witkoff are doing, but let's call it a negotiation for the sake of this conversation. They're coming from the point of view that all of these transactional offers are of interest to Putin because he understands that the wealth they generate, not realizing that actually the reality is the total inversion of that. He has power, therefore can accrue and acquire almost any wealth that he wants. That's no longer of interest. So I think there's a fundamental misalignment there between how their power structures work. But in all other matters, seeing the world as a territory to be plundered, seeing nature as something to be endlessly raped for its resources, so you can add zeros to your bank accounts and stay in power. Those things, of course, are common with Putin.
This is to me interesting because I think to Timothy Snyder and his idea of grifter's bubble. And to me, that's a really good explanation of what we're looking at because Trump and his ilk are creating this. They're trying to take advantage of the situation that they're in because that's just the smart thing to do. Why let all these people in for free if you can charge them money? I mean, duh. And not in Russian, duh. This is like a different duh. So all of a sudden we have, instead of having sheriff and a bad guy. We just have two bad guys. Like the Russian role is now being diluted in a way, almost like, because there's also United States in this space as well. And in that dynamic, the United States is just not really needed by the rest of the world. And so that just kind of flips and bursts the bubble because they thought that they got the system by the whatever control center. But when they do, they break the system, and now a new system needs to be built in its place that really doesn't depend on rely. Actually, is looking at protecting itself against the United States. When Denmark says that the United States is more of a security threat than an ally, I mean
Yeah.
that's saying something.
It's saying something, but it's also, as I love the Danes, it's a welcome dose of reality. It's a welcome dose of recognizing the inflection point that we are.
I mean, they
We are
can
actually
deny
in.
seeing, it's like don't look up at the drones.
Don't look up. Don't look up. Exactly right. And I had this conversation. I won't say, with whom I had this conversation earlier today, which is basically at what point does Europe really wake up? I mean, really and truly wake up to the point where you see a full mobilization for what's coming.
That's what I was
And
going to ask you, Jonathan. What does
yeah,
that mean to you that Europe woke up? Does it mean that they tell the United States to F off? Or how do you know? How will you know?
it partly does mean that. It means an acceptance that NATO is done and that there is no Article 5 guarantee. That would mean then really serious efforts to create partnerships of the willing and those who get it beyond that. So that in this sense, it would be Nordics, Baltics, Netherlands and Britain. So a sort of expanded JEF, Joint Expeditionary Force, with Ukraine deeply embedded within that operation. It would mean that we start to systematically harden our democracies against infiltration and intrusion by informational campaigns and active measures. It means we would start an all of society sort of resilience and inclusion process where we start training everybody up on drones and we start building a drone ecosystem based on the reality and not the sort of delusional procurement processes that still hold sway. High margins for shiny bits of kit that essentially are going to be turned to scrap within 5 minutes on the battlefield. It means we start integrating some of those lessons of drone warfare into our militaries, our training, and so on. There are many, many points to this.
What about this? See, because we have somebody who says that we're delusional because Great Britain doesn't even have an army. And I think that I have one more point to me. How I'll know that Europe is serious is when they take that damn Russian money and start spending it on Ukraine.
This is
Because I
also
think
true.
to me
Yep.
that's a really simple way to show that they are serious because investing in Ukraine is much cheaper and faster than investing in their own security because whether they have army or not, Ukraine already does. Ukraine's already fighting this battle, and this is the same situation we were discussing. Well, not you and I, but individually, I'm sure. Back when Biden was in power, and we were saying what small percentage pittances of our military budget is being spent to help Ukraine, and what a good return we're getting for our money. I think Ukraine is now can make this. Europe can make the exact same argument now because and take that Russian money. To me, that would mean that they're serious.
It would be a sign, and it would tick two boxes. One, it would be saying, Trump, you can't get your hands on this to profit from it, which is clearly part of the deal he's looking at. He really does want to take a chunk of that in connivance with Putin. It would be saying, it would also, as you say, be saying we're going to make sure that Ukraine is fortified and recognize that they are a shield for the whole of Europe. We could incidentally use some of it to build armaments production lines and with joint ownership and cooperation with Ukraine. So yeah, this would all be serious signals that we're taking this absolutely, and of course we would support Ukraine, saying no, you there are certain conditions in here that you absolutely must not cede to, even if
Let
it
me
means
ask
you
you
cannot
another
get Russia
question.
on side.
Do you feel that Europe is sufficiently scared? because if you do what you always done, you get what you always got. So it has to be a different approach, and it feels like emotion has an important part in there. And it seems like if they really are scared, then that's another good impetus for change of direction to be more proactive and concerned in doing something about the Russian threat.
Our very first episode that we did had the thumbnail on my channel was we're not something like we're not nearly scared enough, and I'm afraid it still holds, and for a number of reasons. We haven't fully understood what it is like to be occupied by Russia. Many Polish families will know what it's like. Many Ukrainian families will know what it's like. What it involves is the destruction, the elimination, liquidation of your elites and your most educated classes. It means mass rape, torture, and abuse. It may mean that your cities are leveled if you do not comply. And then it means you will become a source for a parasitic entity that will inject its corrupted values into your institutions. Well, it will destroy your institutions
But
and
come on,
impose
there
its
were
own.
even people. There were even people who wanted to live inside the matrix.
Well, yeah, exactly. The Matrix seems to me to be. I would take the Matrix over being occupied by Russia, to be frank, because you get some cool skills in the Matrix, and it seems slightly less dystopian than and part of a vassal state in the
Yes, after
Russian
all that,
Empire.
I think that place froze sometime in 1999.
Yes, that's right. So about the same period. But no, so we're not scared of that. We're not paying attention to the deportation and brainwashing of Ukrainian children on a horrific scale. We're not paying attention to the use
No,
of
but I'm not
people
saying
in the
I'm.
Donetsk as
I don't.
meat,
I don't.
meat fodder for the cannons.
Jonathan, let's be
Yes.
real here. I am not expecting people in power of Great Britain to become so overwhelmed by the suffering of Ukrainian people to put a life of British soldiers at risk. But what I'm trying to figure out is if we are correct in our kind of statements that Ukraine is just the beginning and there will be others, and Putin is going to, this is all sending a message,
Yes.
then they should be afraid for themselves. They shouldn't be afraid for others. They should be afraid for
Yeah,
themselves.
of course. And one of the things there, and the person I spoke to is that we will not properly wake up until the drones are literally impacting our cities, and we experience the same things the Ukrainians do, which is the electricity is off, and at night time the horrors begin. The whine of the drones coming over, the Garans and so on, which frankly are the size of a small car, like a mini, one of those chunky minis. That's the size of the things that are flying over people's houses and buildings with the little sort of lawnmower engine kind of sound, and then the POVO, the air defenses go off, and so you have to go through half the day without electricity, and then at night time you have a visitation of horrors and the lottery of death, which is what Russia inflicts. Those drones, every European city is in range of those drones. If they travel a bit further, maybe they can't carry the same payload, but every major city in Western Europe is within range right now of those same drones.
But Europeans, NATO countries have more weapons. They can defend themselves, unlike Ukrainians, right?
Well, not when it comes to air defense, no. I mean, Ukrainian air defense has shown that it is remarkably effective, but it is tested now with potentially hundreds of these objects per night. I have to say, European cities do not have that infrastructure in place to shoot these down. They do not have preparedness for electronic warfare and all the other spectra of warfare that are required to do that. No, Europe is absolutely unprepared for this. Plus, if you take into account that drones could be launched from Grey Fleet ships, they could cut our internet cables, etc. We are, to an extent, far more vulnerable in some ways than Ukraine, because our economies are not geared up to any scale of warfare, whereas Ukraine has had the period since 2014 to build in a level of resilience to its economic system and to build, I would say, extremely effective air defense units. No, we're utterly unprepared for this. Talking to an expert on drones some of these airports that were buzzed, and I asked the obvious question, well, why can't they take those out? Well, one, that permissions and bureaucracy. Another one is that even the electronic warfare that is available is of a civilian class, and the wavelengths that it operates under are completely published in the public, signaling to Russia that they operate their military combat grade drones outside those wavelengths. We've got no way to take them out. So if this was turned hostile, you would see airports around Europe, power stations turning into glowing embers before anyone has lifted a finger to stop it.
See, and people say you're an optimist. Look at this, and
they don't say that you're.
Look at this. This is Financial Times. A couple of days ago, or yesterday, Russia's hybrid warfare puts Europe to the test. Like, this is happening now, and supposedly some politicians are aware. Is this false?
Well, most politicians are now aware it's going on, but again, I won't say who told me this. This person recently asked for a database from a well-known military organization as to could they provide a sort of database or data set of all of the hybrid incursions that have taken place, so they could sort of cross-reference, they could look at what kind of proxies were used, etc. Apparently, neither at the NATO nor the EU level is there any systemic data set of all these hybrid attacks. In any case, the data set that does exist is several months out of date because it takes a long time to update. So I'm sorry, we're not even close to being prepared. We're not even logging all the accounts and bringing them together for analysis, let alone planning really to do something.
Maybe it's a job of a private group, corporation, a billionaire who will say, this is ridiculous. Maybe this is not a government job anymore.
I mean, it absolutely has to. I mean, and I think there's a role for both. I think there's a role for private civic society organizations. I mean, Ukraine shows that you cannot,
maybe
not
we're
leave
losing
everything
time.
to governments.
Maybe we're wasting time waiting for governments to act.
We are, and of course, the Ukrainian approach is to presume that government will fail, to presume that government will not fill in those gaps, and civic society mobilizes to really put the foundations of that job. And then usually we've seen government either takes the credit or just jogs along behind while Ukrainian civic society gets on and solves the problem. Again, I think that's not perhaps realized the extent to which Ukrainian resilience right now, that includes some of the most effective regiments, the technologies that are being developed, the training, the iterative process. Say a drone. So this video I'm going to put out tonight, he makes a really good example. He says, look, you have to start thinking of drones not as a piece of hardware or something to be procured in a traditional process. You have to think of it like a carton of milk, right? It's going to last a week, and then it's done. So you have to have a very agile, very responsive production process, and the tech, the equipment itself has to be hackable, as it were. Otherwise, but again, we're not thinking in those terms. But I would argue that only civic society, only individuals and entrepreneurs can move with that kind of speed, not large, corporate entities that are plugged into the current procurement architecture. So I think you're right. We cannot wait for governments to decide is far more agile and dispersed, and actually, I would say democratic in some ways.
Train your child to man a drone.
Well, this is a story for you, Yuri. See how I've been thinking that we need to be doing this. We need to be the Ministry of Defence needs to be working with let's say the Department of Sport to fund drone clubs in every town and village of the country.
Russia does do that. They sponsor clubs and all sorts of youth movements to learn how to navigate those little drones.
Yes, they do. And Ukraine is doing it as well. You've got kids in secondary school who are building drones, creating drone kits, testing electronic warfare. They are using school halls. Someone I spoke to recently has gone and seen this. I think it was in Chernihiv, where you got these kids basically, testing and racing drones, and it's very gamified. but it's building out those engineering skills. It's building out, this idea of keeping in touch with the technology and the skills to fly them, build them, iterate them. Plus, it's also getting kids aware of the idea that defense is an all of society approach, not something you just defer to government and assume that somebody is on the problem.
After all, people need to have opportunities to express what they want to express. So if you have people who are concerned about national defense, but they have nothing to do about it other than to sit, I don't know, listen to a podcast or start a podcast, why not start a drone club? I think,
It's absolutely.
Fascinating. So here we are, and United States is pushing for this deal that nobody trusts, nobody believes, and
with security guarantees that aren't worth toilet paper, frankly.
right. I mean, that would be kind of interesting seeing on merch. Start printing this peace deal on a toilet paper.
Yeah,
it could be a popular Christmas present for the holidays. I don't know.
This is it. Trump's face on one side, peace deal on the other.
Yeah, and at the same time, we have the national security document, that strategy that is resonating all over the place and blowing up. I just think that it's so good that they finally put it in writing, because I'm so tired of trying to describe this over the past year.
Yes.
For my audiences, and just saying this is what he's doing. He's gangster. He is not a policeman. This is not the world's cop. This is world's gangster. And now we're looking at economic imperialism, Latin America, and banana wars, basically, and just fighting. The United States government should be helping businesses get more profits, and what the hell is this? We're back to Make America Great Again in 19th century, but
18th, I think it's more 18th century, but yeah.
I mean, we're evaluating Monroe Doctrine, because this is really not even what Monroe had in mind.
And is that an 18th century piece of legislation? You'll have to help me on the history there.
Well, 1823.
1823. Okay, so yeah, early 19th century.
Early 19th century, and it was to keep actually Europeans from expanding their empires, and then we became the leader with Teddy Roosevelt. But this is just, now we're going to be robbing this. This is our, you can rob Ukraine, and we're going to be robbing, I don't know, Venezuela. Let's take their tanker and see what happens. And that's a pretty good story, because people are looking at this and going, what the is going on? And this is just another signal to Ukraine and to everybody else, you want guarantee? No, we're going to be impulsive. We're going to be chaotic. We're going to be, the 21st century pirates.
It's it's an alignment of autocrats, and this is where I think people are going to be like, huh? Because there's been a lot of talk about, Trump pushing back on China, and there are hawks within his administration, there certainly are, who think that adversary and feel themselves in some kind of direct confrontation. That's not here how I think Trump is operating. I think he is alignment with the world's autocrats, and he buys into this idea of spheres of influence for those that are peer competitors. And in his mind, there are only two. It's Russia, China, and the US. But of course, we know that Russia is already a vassal of China, and Trump is in alignment with Russia. That means he's in alignment ultimately with China. It just does, which means that when he talks about Greenland, when he talks about Panama Canal, when he talks about Canada and Venezuela, these things are real. We have to take him at his word, but it also means that at some point, this is almost certainly done with some degree of alignment with the autocrats, which is, we take this and you can have that. So what is the quid pro quo? The MAGA regime has been telling us, Trumply, we know exactly what this means. It means Venezuela, it means Greenland, it means... But if you're going to take Greenland, well, Denmark's going to have something to say about it. But that's okay, because Europe, within this concept, is ceded to Russia as its sphere of influence and its sphere to plunder and dominate. And Trump does not expect us to push back, because he expects us to behave as vassals to him in the first instance. And as Russia is in his ideas the next down in the pecking order, we also should behave as vassals towards Russia as well. This is where we're headed, and
to China as well. I mean, if you're on the roll,
ultimately to China. Yes. Well, we're doing that. We're doing that of our own volition. They don't have to put pressure on us for that. We're quite happy to say
you're already there. Okay,
we're already there on that one.
So I guess we're all at, all the goals have been accomplished, and then I guess we're all bowing to China. That's where we find ourselves all together.
But we don't realize it because we're still Ukraine. We've got fine words, but the actions reflect neither the reality we're in nor the values we claim to be espousing. If we were serious about our own defense, our own sovereignty, and our own agency, and if we were clear about not becoming a vassal, we would support Ukraine for victory, to completely drive the invader out of their territory. That is what we would have done from the start. That's when we've had 4 years to come to that conclusion. No, we are reflexively or coercively controlled by Russian narratives to fear a Russian loss and what they might do in those consequences. This is why the uptick, I think, in the so-called peace process we're seeing now is because there was a very real threat of taking those seized assets and handing them to Ukraine to fortify it and its resistance. There are some other stuff kind of going on there as well, but this is the one that has really got, Kirill Dmitriev out of bed. This is the one that's, slightly, I wouldn't say sobered up, what's his name? Dimon Medvedev,
Blogger Medvedev.
It's got him to come and issue his usual threats. It's got Karaganov, has come out of his coffin, which he seems to inhabit, as a Dracula type sinister figure. It's got them all out and exercised. Why? And they're activating all their assets and agents around the world because they do not want those funds handed over. They want a weak and divided Ukraine.
And I will say once again that if they could have gotten that money, they would have.
Oh, this is it. Of course, they can't go through legal process, as it was described to me by a lovely chap called Tim Ash, who's a pro-Ukraine economist, a leading world economist. He says essentially Russia would have to waive its sovereign immunity in order to sue Belgium to either get those funds back, or if those funds were handed over, sue Belgium to say that was naughty and you can't do it. Suspending their sovereign immunity means they could be sued for goodness knows how many other crimes, including their seizure of Western assets in Russia, plus all the other innumerable crimes they've committed. So they won't be doing that. All this debate about the intrinsic risk of using those funds is just fairy stories. And as I say, the main argument used here is, the euro might lose its value. Let's imagine a scenario where the euro literally crashes through the floor, and that is where a sovereign European territory is invaded and occupied that happens to be in the euro, like one of the Baltic nations. So, I mean, we are literally dancing on the edge of the precipice as if it wasn't there.
Dancing on the edge of a precipice. What a beautiful point to end today's conversation. Here we are dancing on the edge of a precipice.
The rather sinister conversation as they've increasingly become, yes.
Yeah, but I think we're just calling things by their names, and I think that's a sinister statement maybe in this world, but I think that's what our audiences expect us to do, and that's what we deliver. So,
yeah, that's one of the phrases I hear from a few of the like Michael Naki. Was it "Nazwać wieści po swoimi imenami"? I think that's something like the phrase, isn't it?
Exactly.
Cool things as they are.
Yeah, that's what Silicon Curtain Report attempts to do. So, subscribe, hit like, and thanks to everyone that contributes to ZSU and to independent journalism all over the place. You guys are great. Jonathan, thanks so much.
Yuri, thank you.
Take care, everyone.